20 years ago, I was ground zero for Hurricane Katrina. Can you believe it's been 20 years this year? I grew up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and I was right there for the storm. In fact, we had 8 feet of water in my house. We personally, for the storm, we stayed at our church, the church I grew up in. We stayed there. It was 3 blocks off the beach on a 25-foot bluff, and we had 2 feet of water out the back door. And in the middle of the storm, we thought that the roof was coming off of the building we were in at the church, so we moved to the education building, which was a single story. And while we were there, the water came into the building and crept up about 1 foot to 18 inches on us, and we were trapped in that building until the waters receded. It was terrifying. And then after the storm surge abated, we emerged from the building to see that there was destruction everywhere around us. To our east was a bridge that connected us to the rest of the Mississippi Gulf Coast. That was destroyed. To the north of us, by I-10, it was still flooded. To the west of us was New Orleans, and there was no help coming from them because they were dealing with their own set of struggles. And so we were cut off in every direction. That first night, we tried mopping up the floors of the church because there was just mud and silt and gunk everywhere. So we tried cleaning that up. And then when we made the last minute decision to stay at the church, so we really didn't pack food for what would turn out to be days of not having food. And so we raided the church's kitchen. And the church had a cookie ministry at the time, so we ate a lot of sugar cookies over the next few days. Handed them out to other people in the area too. But that night we slept on folding tables on the ground just to get us off the muddy floor. In fact, they were the tables that the handbell choir used, and the handbell choir has real thick foam pads to lay the handbells on, and so that's what we slept on that night. And oh my goodness, when we laid down that night, we were just exhausted. Physically and emotionally exhausted from the trauma that we had just experienced. Now, throughout the night, we woke up a few times as our dogs were barking at looters who were trying to get into the church because that was a thing. But I will never forget, 20 years later, I will never forget waking up the morning after the storm. I woke up out of a dead sleep to the sound of a Black Hawk helicopter hovering outside of the church as they were dropping off emergency personnel in our area to see if anybody survived. And I'll be honest, when I woke up out of that dead sleep that next morning, I confess, I said a really dirty word at church because I realized that everything I had experienced the day before was not a dream, and my new reality was sinking in. That in just a few hours, 24 hours-ish, my whole life had changed. Now, I can't imagine, particularly how the women felt on Easter morning when they got up before sunrise to go and take care of the body of Jesus that was in the tomb. You know, Jesus had been the embodiment of hope for those who believed him. He claimed to be the Son of God. And his disciples and these women, they had left. Some of them have left their careers. Others left their families behind to travel with Jesus because they wanted to be a part of what Jesus was doing in the world. And yet the one whom they had placed their hope in, the one whom they had placed their faith in, they watched be arrested, be mercilessly beaten, and nailed to a cross just a few days prior. Now, in Judaism, from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday, it's known as the Sabbath. And according to the Old Testament laws, one was not allowed to work on the Sabbath, and one was certainly not allowed to touch a dead body on the Sabbath. So when Jesus passed away on Friday at about 3 o'clock, once he was finally released by the Romans, his followers quickly got him off of the cross and hurriedly put him into a borrowed tomb because they had a hard deadline of sundown before they couldn't touch him anymore. So they did all that very quickly, knowing full well that they would need to come back Sunday morning to finish attending to his body to make it ready for burial. But I'm sure by Sunday morning, some of them woke up muttering things under their breath because the reality of their situation had sank in. Life as they knew it, now that their master was dead, was completely changed. It would never be the same. At least not the way that they thought. Now, friends, let me teach you something. If you get nothing else out of this morning's message, walk away with this. God is faithful to you even when you lose faith in him. God brings hope to you even when you feel like all hope is gone. The question is, will you wait for God to move? You know, the Easter story is all about God showing up. The women went to the tomb that morning, Easter morning, to go finish preparing Jesus' body, and when they got there, there was no body. Instead, they were greeted by angels who were overjoyed to tell them that the Jesus who was crucified on Friday is now resurrected on Sunday, and he is no longer there. Why look for the dead among the living? And so the women, they leave the tomb excited and confused with a lot of questions. And they go back to tell the disciples. Well, the disciples, they didn't have the privilege of getting this news straight from an angel, so they are a little bit more skeptical of the news. But I want you to picture this, that they're all in this room. They're terrified because the Romans and the religious leaders could be coming after them next, so they got the doors locked. And they're debating amongst each other. What does this mean? His body's gone. The angels say that he's resurrected. What does this mean? They're worrying, they're fretting, they're trying to figure out what to do next. And then Jesus shows up. Luke tells us the story out of chapter 24. It says, while they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet. And while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. He said to them, "This is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that was written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms." Now, I love that it says that they thought Jesus was a ghost. Now, every night before bedtime, Ava, my 9-year-old daughter, and I have story time. So we read our Bible, and then we read Dog Man. Like, it's a great little segue between the two. And this past week, we were reading this story, the story of Holy Week. And so we get to this part where they think he's a ghost, and boy, that sparked a very interesting conversation right before bedtime about ghosts. And consequently, we got onto the topic of aliens, but that's a conversation for a whole other time. It's a fascinating conversation with a 9-year-old. And I told her, I said, in the first century, they believed in ghosts. She said, "Well, how did they know about ghosts?" I said, "Well, how do you know about ghosts? These are stories that, humanity's told for a really long time." But my 9-year-old, she's quick like her mother. And she put 2 and 2 together. She said, "Daddy, is the reason Jesus ate something in front of them because if he was a ghost, the food would fall right through his belly?" I said, "Yes, actually, that's exactly why Jesus ate in front of them, to prove to them that he was real." Now, to be fair to the disciples, if your dead best friend showed up inside of your locked house, you'd probably think they were a ghost too. You'd be like, "We're moving." Like, it's just... But notice Jesus brings them peace. Peace had been the least thing that they had experienced over the last 3 days. Rather, dashed hopes, shattered dreams, and broken faith. That had been their reality. But then Jesus shows up and he offers them peace. In fact, Jesus restores all that had been lost. They just needed to wait. Have you ever experienced something good in your life? Or maybe the answer to a prayer? Or an unexpected blessing? Or maybe you felt backed into a corner and you did not know a way out, and yet somehow there was a breakthrough. Friends, that was God at work in your situation. So let me ask you this. If God has been faithful to fulfill his promises and goodness in you in the past, what makes you think that he's not going to be faithful to fulfill his promises and goodness to you in the present? But man, I've talked to a lot of people over the years who don't think that God will come through for them. They think, oh yeah, God works in other people's lives, but God's not going to work in mine. And then they have a litany of reasons as to why. One of which is they don't feel like they deserve the goodness of God. Newsflash, none of us do. In fact, that's why it's called grace. Grace is that which God gives us that we don't deserve. And some of us need more grace than others, and some of us receive more grace than others. But then other people think that they don't deserve the goodness of God because of their past, whatever their past may be. And that's a fairly common opinion. But here's the deal. We all have a past. In fact, if you knew the pasts of all the people you're seated around, you would realize you are in very good company. We're all misfits. We're all sinners. Now, I don't take people's confessions because I'm not a priest, but I do hear a lot of people's stories. And the common thread is that you're not alone. You're not the only one who's been through what you've been through. That God still shows up for you despite what you've done. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of Jesus going to the cross. Friends, you are never too far gone from God. The first year that I made it to East Texas, the church I was at in East Texas, I taught a Bible study that year. And I was the new young pastor, and everybody wanted to take my Bible study. I had about 100 people in the room. And it was in an auditorium, and so I could watch the people enter in that was about eye level with me on the stage. And I watched this biker guy, real rough-looking guy, turns out had a lot to drink that night, come walking in, and in the back of the room, he just started pacing. Nobody else in the Bible study could see this, but I could see it while I was teaching. And then I watched, we had security on campus at the church, and I had 2 security guards come out this way and 2 security guards come out this way watching him. And I'm like, oh no, this is about to go down. And so I wrapped up the Bible study very quickly, prayed, said amen. As soon as I said amen, he made a beeline to me. He needed to talk to a pastor. So I got him away from other people because I didn't know what was going to happen. And he wanted to tell me that God, because of what he had done in his life, that God was damning him to hell. And I said, look, I don't know what you've done, but I know that God will forgive you if you give it to him. He said, no, you don't understand what I've done. God is damning me to hell. And this went on for several minutes, this back and forth. Finally, I looked at him and I said, okay, you and I believe in 2 different gods, Because the God that I believe in sent his son to die on the cross so that you don't have to live in the hell you're in right now. And he turned around and he walked out of that church. It's one of the lowest moments of my ministry to present somebody with the forgiveness of God for whatever it is, the baggage that he was carrying, and for him to turn around and reject it and walk away. Security walked me to my car that night. About 40 minutes later, I thought, guys, you're being overly cautious. As soon as we walked out, heard his engine roar up. He'd been sitting out there waiting on me the whole time. Some of us don't think that we deserve it, or because of our past, we will never experience it. And yet some of us still don't think we will ever experience the goodness of God because we've lost faith in him. Friends, when I read the Easter story, I see a whole lot of people who knew Jesus for 3 years who had no faith on Easter morning. But here's the good news. God is still faithful to you even when you have lost faith in him. So I'm encouraging you this morning to put aside all of the reasons that you keep dismissing God and simply wait. If you feel stuck in your situation right now, know that it's not over. The new reality that you have found yourself in that has left you feeling discombobulated, man, it's not forever. Something will break through. Because we believe in the resurrected King. That's why we gather on Easter. We believe that Jesus came back to life. But he didn't get there without going through a lot of pain and even death. You know, the goodness of God does not preclude the problems of this life. But Jesus, he stands as the fulfillment of God's promises. And friends, if God is faithful enough to the promises that he made on this cosmic level, like the forgiveness of all human sin, or the reversal of death to which we have to look forward to, how much more will God be faithful to fulfill his promises to you? So the song that I've just had on repeat leading up into Easter was the one that they just sang. It's called Wait on You. And these are lyrics that I have just come back to over and over again in the last few weeks. I want to read them to you. It says, God, if you said it, you'll perform it. May not be how I want you to, but here's what I'll do. I'm going to wait on you. I'm going to wait on you. I've tasted your goodness in the past. I'll trust in your promise in my present because I'm going to wait on you. Friends, it's Easter. If you are not waiting for God to move the unmovable thing in your life, then you've missed it. Because this is the God who reverses hardships. This is the God who overcomes death. This is the God who does the unthinkable. So wait on him to move in your life. Expect him to do something with the troubles that you're facing right now. It may not turn out the way you think it's going to turn out, but I guarantee you, he'll show up. He showed up for the disciples who woke up on Easter morning thinking hope had passed them by. He showed up for me 20 years ago when I woke up the next day thinking my life as I knew it was over. It was, for a time. But God redeemed the most traumatic thing that I experienced in my life up to that point to lead me to where I am today. I'm in Texas. I married the woman that I'm married to. I answered a call to ministry, all as a direct result from what I dealt with in that storm. Wait for God to move. Now, this whole concept of waiting for God in your life, that may be new to you, but guess what? What do you have to lose? that you aren't already losing. Let God prove himself to be faithful to you even while you struggle with faith in him. And let Jesus show up to be your peace when you don't have peace. And for some of us in this room, there is no peace in your life right now. Or maybe you have seen a lot of Easters in your life, and none of this is new. If that is you, don't get so inoculated to the goodness of God that you fail to have expectation that he's going to show up for you again. I'll close with this. They that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings like an eagle and soar. They shall walk and not get weary. They shall run and not faint. That's what happens when you wait. So friends, may the resurrected Jesus show up for you in just the nick of time.